I'm very happy to be here in Vilnius today. I believe spring has finally arrived in our northern part of the world, and I think that applies to BIM as well as to the weather now. As you probably can see from the program, I work in a company that has activities in Lithuania. We are actually in all the Baltic countries and in the Nordic countries, and I believe this is a very good basis for cooperation. We have these countries that are quite small, but together we will form a force in developing things in the future. Today I'm here to represent the BIM Alliance Sweden, where I'm newly elected chair of the Technical Advisory Board. This is quite a new association that has been formed by joining a number of previous initiatives. So I'll try to give you an overview of what happens in Sweden today and how the BIM landscape looks currently. You've probably seen this picture or some variety of it already. I'll try to have it as a basis for how we actually perceive the development of BIM as a practice. We can say we have this vision that we create the uninterrupted or seamless workflow or information flow in the sector, and that of course is a bit ahead of us. So that goal is clear, but in practice short-term success depends on that we can use BIM to be profitable even now. So as things go, there are some parts of the process where BIM can very easily be applied, and you get benefits out of it already. And then in the long run, we have to see that these parts fit together, so we have a life cycle perspective on information. This is of course a long-term success of BIM, to have it integrated throughout the entire process and involving all the actors of the sector. The driving forces in Sweden differ a bit from what exists in other countries in the Nordic and internationally. BIM development or implementation has been very much relying on big companies introducing in projects, big companies that have the capacity to develop the practice and the capability to drive advanced technologies in big projects. Things are then kind of petering down from these big companies and big projects into the entire sector. And that's also kind of a goal that we have, to have broad application of BIM rather than these cutting-edge projects only. So there is a tradition of sector initiatives, associations promoting the use of technology in the construction sector. And all the actors in the sector are in some way or another connected to these initiatives. We have had two large development programs during the 90s and the early 21st century. And now we are going on with this BIM Alliance after a period where things have been going on in a number of smaller associations. What is also specific is that we do not have a government that has been setting rules for how to procure or use BIM in Sweden. So it's been a private sector business almost altogether. We do not have any major owners like Norway and Finland that have been setting these rules either. But things are changing. The public owners of properties in Sweden were split a couple of decades ago and privatized, but are now joining forces. And that's a very interesting and exciting development. So how does this life cycle perspective look when you see at it? I just get into one little project that illustrates this. It's about planning, city planning. And this is a small but interesting application of BIM where you can involve the municipalities, the stakeholders, the inhabitants of the municipalities in the process in dynamically building a new city or part of a city. So these buildings, which are quite schematic, as you can see in the lower right corner there, can be placed dynamically, stretched, and then from that you get an analysis that shows what will this mean to the development of this society. How many inhabitants will we have here? What are the requirements for schools and transportation and things like that? And it can be dynamically changed during the ways. So that's a way of expanding BIM from the technical specialists to the entire field of actors in city planning. Another example from a project for an hospital extension in Sweden, in Stockholm, where there was a model, a 3D model with not so much BIM into it, but 3D issued by the authorities, and all the companies that were participating in this competition for designing the hospital had to enter their proposals into that same model. And that actually meant that the client here had very equal proposals in respect of how they were presented, and resulted in that quite another proposal was selected than what it was initially thought. So that's one example. Another of how BIM is taken into a bit of new areas is what's called the paperless bridge project. This is not a big prestige project. It's quite a small bridge that was to be rebuilt, and the National Transport Administration required for this project to be modeled in BIM, with the goal to have it have the information used for procurement, for construction, and for maintenance and operations, with the idea to test whether this was a profitable implementation of BIM. It was in fact very successful. The kind of effects of this was that the production went much more smoothly. There were less disruptions than usually in this kind of projects, and the project costs were quite reduced and much better controlled above all. there were very few additions to the original costs in this project. And as you can see, it was very detailed, modeled in detail with geometry as well as all the properties needed for this. You can see here how one single element was modeled and its properties that adhere to national standards. And that's one very important thing, that we have this tradition of common standards and guidelines for construction design that are now applied to BIM and seem very, or have proved very effective in that sense. There's the classification, the guidelines for presenting information, for layering, CAD layers, which are also used for BIM, for categorizing rather than layering now, and also for specifications based on the classification standard, BSAB. So this history has proved beneficial to BIM, that we have this classification dating from SFB to BSAB, and now a third generation of classification is being developed based on BSAB and the ISO standard 12006 Part 2, for those of you who are interested. So we will also then have a classification that covers not only the parts of the building, but also the properties of the parts of the building. Sweden has also always been very active in standardization, very early with Swedish standards, and later we've been promoting standardization in ISO with the Swedish standards as an example. And lately also, of course, when Building Smart and OGC have taken up speed, Sweden has been there and intend to be there even more. Actually, this association, BIM Alliance, is very much going into standards and open BIM, not proprietary BIM at any part. The national guidelines, they include the Bygghandlingar 90, which is the presentation part, the documentation part. We have the specifications, and also, not less important, the contracts, the legal part of managing information in projects. Illustrating with one more project that has been very important for the growth of this practice. It's a big hospital project in Stockholm, the NKS, Nya Karolinska, where Skanska won a contract for construction and operations of this hospital. So they were forced to form the information for the operations phase as well. And a number of consultants, smaller and bigger in Sweden, were involved in this. And together with the contractor, formed a method for managing all the objects and their properties and the systems they were connected into. Based on IFC for transfer information, but then developing property sets specific to what was needed here. It's a bit special, and it's still being kind of a dialogue in the sector how to develop the property sets. So it set focus on the information, really, on a large scale for the first time. And the idea of this is, of course, to making things easy to manage. We have complex information structures in a hospital. They shall be made available to end users. They shall be made adjustable to purpose. There are very many purposes now, from planning all the way to operations, and also to make these things interchangeable between systems and owners. Of course, the company operating this facility does not have CAD systems or such, but they have to integrate the information into their systems for maintenance and operations. So this project has resulted in many more, and also into a cooperation initiatives that contains agreeing on these properties, these codes, which are called the BIP codes. And it's not at all restricted to the health sector, but used in quite other places too, like a server hall for Ericsson. They are just like the big actors in IT, building server halls all over the world, and has adopted this. Still developing, of course, and we are trying to introduce the thoughts internationally as well, and to see how can IFC be adopted to have very, very adjustable property sets in the model views. So this is maintenance view of this server hall, showing one kind of components filter out. Okay, so I'll just say a little bit about what is BIM Alliance Sweden really. It was formed from 3 associations dealing with information for property management, dealing with BIM implementation nationally, the Open BIM Association, and also the Swedish chapter, or Swedish part of Building Smart. With the common goal now to maximize the BIM benefits from using BIM by cooperating on the national level. The tasks of BIM Alliance is to drive implementation by informing, education, and so on. Also to manage and maintain the industry standards and tools used. And thirdly, to develop the processes, the methodology, and the standards and tools as well. Within BIM Alliance, there are stakeholder groups that are active in different areas. These altogether consist of somewhere between 100 and 150 persons, and they gather people from the sector, and then we have this technical board that gathers the initiatives from these stakeholder groups and transforms that into projects for standardization and common guidelines and so on. There are some projects ongoing, like we've had a project for defining the standardization needs. We have a project for defining delivery packages, or data drops, as they're called in Britain. And there are more specific projects, like building an application programming interface for lock and passage systems for the property sector. And also we're, as I said, accelerating the activities with Building Smart International and also with OGC, intending to take active part in development of IOC as well as a Building Smart Data Dictionary and IDM, and also product libraries. So we're getting into it very actively. The first project here, talking about standardization needs, has resulted in a roadmap containing 10 projects to improve the implementation and use of BIM, ranging from national BIM guidelines to different kinds of more detailed implementation of BIM and GIS, not least. There have been some crucial parts of the process that we intend to focus on, or interfaces between IFC, or between BIM and GIS is one, focusing on then the planning phase as well as the construction phase. Another one is the industrial construction part, to integrate the construction companies and the materials or manufacturing industry, where currently work in very different ways. This is supposed to be resulting then in a strategic research and development program called the Smart Built Environment. There are some other cooperative initiatives going on. BIM i staten, or BIM for the state, is what I hinted at, that the 5 property owners, publicly owned, that develop a common BIM strategy. The National Transport Administration is very much of a driving force in infrastructure projects especially, but also in promoting standards on the wide range. And they are introducing requirements actually for all projects of some size in this year. There are some government inquiries, should be that's the Swedish word, that the BIM Alliance is also participating in, and finally procurement directives to promote BIM, change how things are working. And I'm proud to announce that this strategic R&D program has just got green light. This picture is from a press conference last week, where it was announced that the Smart Built Environment program has a funding of 200 million Swedish kronor, spanning not only BIM but digitalization in construction and planning. The CEO of BIM Alliance to the left here, and the Minister of Housing, IT and City Planning, a very, very fitting combination. Mehmet Kaplan is one, second to the right, and the two ladies are the funding bodies, representative of the funding bodies. So this is a 10-year program. It's 100 million kronor public funding and 100 million industry funding. This is for the starting period, the next 3 years. So we hope to make a very good result from that, to continue the program on the same level, or even accelerating. There have been a number of companies already involved in this proposal, and we expect more to be involved in the future. BIM Alliance consists of roughly 160 companies in Sweden, so hopefully all of them will be involved in one form or another. The goals of this program is quite obvious. It aims at reducing the environmental impact of construction. A very important issue to the government in Sweden is to reduce the lead times in construction. We have a great need for housing in Sweden. And also, of course, making affordable buildings. And also, not least, to form a new business logic that supports digitalized forms. A little schematic of what it aims at. That we have public and private interest in this, and that it spans business applications throughout the entire process, from planning to facility management. And also that it is about building construction and building as well as infrastructure. Finally, I think I'd get back to a kind of more traditional picture. I'd say we have there is a vast experience in presenting things in drawings, and let's not forget that, because a drawing, that's a view of the reality that we face, existing or planned, and the need or the objective of the drawing is to conveying a message and to be technically accurate. Those are two things we need to stick to. We aim at using the drawing and the BIM model for designing the right building, to realize the design and to use it over and over again. The building will be used over and over again, and the information should always also be possible to use over and over again. Well, now, how does it fit with BIM? Well, the drawing is a presentation suited to the purpose, and it's available anytime to those who need to use it. When we're talking about BIM, then, the task for the BIM community is to make the same things possible and to realize the added potential of BIM to this, to have good information available at any time to everybody who needs it. Well, thank you.